Welcome to the NNJR Trackside Classroom series on YouTube. Today, this session is targeted for solo and advanced drivers. And our topic is give yourself an out. And we'll talk a lot about some of the situations that can cause us to need an out. But before we dive in, let me just start by sharing the normal disclaimer that we're going to talk about a lot of techniques today that are, I believe, very proven, but everybody's different. Every circumstance is different. And we all know that the sport that we love has some risk associated with it. And we all take on that risk when we come to the track. So what I'd like you to think about before we dive in here is situations where you've been involved on track, seen on track, heard about, where it was dangerous or could have been, things like, you're giving a pass, you give a pass, but you didn't realize there was a second car right behind the first one. A yellow flag pops out when you're just alongside somebody that you pulled out to pass, or you get to heavy braking zone and there's oil or antifreeze, or maybe you entered a fast corner a little too fast, or a car spins in front, or the brakes don't work in a heavy braking zone. I mean, these are just some of the things we hope never happen, but we all know that they can and do happen. And so today we're going to talk about making sure we have an out. And by the way, this is going to improve our overall driving as well. So we're going to talk about escape hatches, situational awareness, planning for the unexpected. And most importantly, we're going to talk about ways that we can all get better. Now, I start off with a couple of quotes that are just a reminder about the risks we take. These are from Rick By, a very accomplished Canadian driver. And, he mentions, the heartbeat away from disaster. But more importantly, I want to emphasize his second comment here, and I'll come back to that. He says, I'm amazed at how slowly most drivers react. When something happens, it's time to slow down. Not now, but right now. Right now. And you're going to see some of the reasons why that's the case. Now, we need escape hatches because things do happen. Some of those can be on track. Often they're off track. We're going to talk about both. Here's the classic, typical on-track escape hatch. We turn into a corner and we realize we're too fast or we're too early, or maybe there's even there's oil or something, and we realize we need to slow down. Well, the escape hatch is to simply straighten the hands so that we're not turning anymore, but we're now in a straight line and we can stand on the brakes. Or if it's oil or whatever, we can attempt to slow down as best as we can. And as the slide says, this only works if we decide to use it early. If we wait till we're at the apex, it's too late. But if we anticipate, if we react quickly when we realize that something's not correct, we can easily stay on the track. Obviously, the corner is going to be given up, but that's no big deal. So this is an important escape hatch that not enough people think about and use, but it does require that early identification. Now, of course, off track means runoff areas, and most tracks and most turns at most tracks have runoff areas. I'm going to use Lime Rock as one example here, but we can think about others. But we all know there are some corners that have limited runoff room. If you think about the uphill at Lime Rock or the off camber at Watkins Glen, and I'm sure you can think of some others. But let's think about Lime Rock. Obviously, Big Bend has an escape route on its escape road, rather. So that's easy. But the second half of Big Bend, if we get into that too hot, there's all kinds of grass off to the left we can drive off into. So plenty of room there. But let's think about West Bend, where there isn't a huge amount of room, yet at the same time there is room. So if we get in too hot and we decide that we have to bail out, we can relax the wheels and drive 2 or 4 wheels onto the grass, and that grass extends all the way down to the bridge after West Bend. And yes, there's not a lot of room there, but there is room. And if we take advantage of that room by identifying and reacting early, we'll be in good shape. But again, we're identifying, and here we emphasize reacting early. That's really the key. If we wait too long, we have fewer options. So we're talking about escape hatches. Do you know where they are on every track that you drive? And do you know how to use them? How well prepared are you? That's what I'd like everyone watching this to think about. And if the answers aren't comfortable enough, then it's time to do something about it. Now, I've said this several times, that the hard part is we have to decide early and quickly to bail out. And so the key question you should be asking yourself is, can I improve this skill? And the answer to that is yes. So the way we do that is we become better at understanding what's going on around us. The fancy way to say that is situational awareness. And we can work on our reaction time. So here's some dimensions of situational awareness, or perhaps another way to think about this is questions you can ask yourself to test yourself about your track awareness. How far ahead are you looking? And how far ahead are you actually seeing things? And a good test of that is, how soon can you see each flag station? Everybody sees the flag station when they drive by it, but do you see it as soon as it comes into view? And that requires the eyes being, far down track. And we do that with a glance. We don't stare or focus, all the way down track, but we glance there. We put our main vision, for a split second down the track at the flag station, and anything else that we might see as we look that far ahead. And if we see something different, whether that's in the distance, certainly if we see a flag at a flag station, a flag that wasn't at that station the previous lap, we know something needs to, we know we need to react. But the same applies if we see something on the track surface, or obviously if we see a car off the track or whatever. In all cases, if it's different, that should set off an alarm and get us prepared to react. And how wide is the vision? Now we're talking about pull off and runoff spots. Where is there room alongside the track? Have you seen where there's grass, where there's where there's room, maybe where there isn't room? Again, just being aware of where those spots are. And an underappreciated skill that we all have, that I'm going to talk more about in a moment, is our other senses. Our nose and our ears tell us things. Antifreeze has a distinctive smell. Oftentimes we can smell antifreeze even if we can't see it. Not so much with oil on track, but if something's wrong with the car, we may smell that, for example. So, don't discount those other senses. And then last, but certainly not least, how well do you know yourself? How consistent or not how focused versus distracted. Does traffic, get in the way of you being aware of what's going on, and so on. These are all things that if there's something not correct or not right, I guess would be the right word, then it's going to affect our ability to react to an unexpected situation. Here's another way to think about how much focus and attention we have to put on the safety aspects as we drive. So if you think about when you were starting to drive as a student, if you think of the amount of attention or focus that you have to apply to driving, if you think, imagine that's $10. This is a concept from Keith Code that you have $10 worth of focus. You can spend that 10 any way you want. Well, if you're a student, you're spending a lot of it on the line, on reference points, right? You're spending some on braking, some on gauges. There isn't much left over. That's why the instructor is so important to help a new student get around the track safely, because they're going to help that student who has very little bandwidth left over, very little change from their $10. Solo drivers, perhaps they're spending $2 on the line and reference points and so on, and $1 on car fuel, maybe $3 on braking, and 50 cents on gauges and some other things. So there's a little change left over there to focus on some other things. But compare that to a pro driver, right? They're spending of their $10, very little of it on the actual driving portion, and a whole lot of it on other things, on what's going on around them, on racecraft and all the rest. So, we can all get better is the point. And the key message I'd like you to take away is how much do you have left? How much of your $10 is left to deal with traffic, flags, runoff room, looking at the track surface, and so on. And if it's not, if it isn't a fairly big number, then, we need to work on getting to the point where this becomes a bigger focus. Now, we've talked about reaction time. How do we improve it? Well, we have to plan for the unexpected. We have to think about the worst that could happen, whether it's a car spinning in front, a mechanical antifreeze, whatever it is, and then do our best to make sure it doesn't happen. And, a lot of that has to do with just paying attention on the track. As Ross Bentley points out, sadly, not everyone, even experienced drivers, pays as much attention as they should. And so focus and attention is kind of top of the list here. Then, of course, there is the issue of, you have to decide how much risk you're willing to take. How far are you willing to push? If you have $10 of attention and you're spending $9.50 of it trying to get to a particular lap time or trying to get through a corner that much faster, that's not going to leave a lot left over for when something happens that you weren't expecting. So that's a decision we each have to make. And we have to make that decision every time we go on track. We may not think about it that way, but we have to think about it every time we go on track. So other ways to plan for the unexpected, some basics here. I've talked about this. Plan where to drive off. Where's that escape hatch? Look at every flag station. And pay attention to your ears and nose. And I'm going to say more about this on the next slide. Stay focused. Have a trigger to refocus with. So, you've heard me say this before, perhaps in a different context. We, as an experienced driver, we have to have a baseline. We have to have a clear mental picture of what the normal track looks like. The track surface, the flag stations, the way the car sounds, the way the car feels, all of that. we have to have that baseline firmly in our mind, in our fingertips, in our ears, and anything that deviates should be a red flag waving in front of our face that we need to, slow down a bit, anticipate what might happen, and get ready to respond. So this is one way we can improve our reaction time, because there's usually some type of warning, not always, of course, but often there is. And if we ignore that little warning, we may not like the result. So this baseline is critical. The baseline is critical for driving well, of course, and that's how I've talked about it in other contexts. But here, it's equally essential for safety. Now, ways we can improve. We can visualize, sitting in the car in the paddock, sitting in the car at home, sitting in our easy chair at home. We can visualize where and how to drive off on every corner. We can visualize when a flag station comes in view. A video may even help with that. We can visualize looking ahead, being hyper aware, paying attention to our ears and nose. And we can visualize staying focused, and we can think about a trigger to refocus us if we find our mind wandering at all. We can develop our skill in traffic. And here's a way to do that in daily driving. If you're on the highway, look at 2, 3, 4 cars that are around your car, and say their colors out loud. 2 white ones, a black one, and a gray one. And then a few minutes later, when they're not next to you, recall those car colors. And were they beside you, behind you, in front of you? That's an easy thing that you can practice when you're not on the track, and it will improve your ability to deal with traffic when you are on the track. We've talked about sensory input sessions many times before, and I'm going to emphasize them again in this context. And this all goes back to the Sherlock Holmes quote. There's a major difference between seeing and observing. And you all know that Ross Bentley is big on these sessions, and so are many other experts. So there are generally 4 categories of these sessions here that are recommended. But I'm going to highlight some of them right here that particularly deal with the safety aspects we've been talking about, and it has to do with the track surface and the car feedback. And the slide points out here that our eyes and our nose, by the way, are wired directly to our brain. So if we smell something or hear something, our brain hears that, or I should say reacts to it much, much faster than if we saw it. Our brain has to react to everything that happens around it. But for probably survival reasons that go back thousands of years, our brain registers what it hears and what it smells faster than what it sees. And so that tells us something as well. So here's the deliberate practice types of sessions dealing with the track, the car, traffic, sensory input. And I'm not going to spell them all out here. What I am going to do is indicate that on the website, our deliberate practice worksheets, or sensory input worksheets, call them whatever you like. And there's several that have to do with the topics we're talking about, 3 in particular. And here's an example. It's a what would I do if? And so I go out for a session and I think about these questions. What would I do if I smell antifreeze going into the uphill? What would I do if a car swerves in front of me in West Bend? What would happen if my brake pedal goes soft going into Big Bend, or maybe going down the downhill? and then we come in after a session and we kind of write down what we learned or what we observed. And we do that right after we come in. That's how these worksheets work. There's a whole set of them. The first few have to do with the topics we're talking about here. The next several have to do with refining your braking, your steering, and other inputs with the car. But I strongly encourage you to pick one or two and use at least one or two every time you come to the track. And I mentioned earlier that focus is something that is essential, and we need to make that a habit, as we get onto the track every time. Remember, I said we have to make that decision about how much risk we're willing to take every time we go on the track. One way we can do that is to create this trigger phrase. It could be something like hyper aware or safety first or just focus, but something you can use while you're visualizing, and something that will remind you to be 100% focused. The other thing to do as we're sitting waiting to go on the track is thinking about what's going on around us. Is there anything going on with the weather? Are there new drivers in this group? Am I not really feeling very well? Did I just change something on the car? What might have changed on the track since last time? All those kinds of things. Again, we're just trying to get our mind expanded, if you will, to deal with the things that go beyond just getting around the track and being on the line and so on. So as a summary, there's the old saying, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. And that's exactly what we've been talking about today. We have to develop our situational awareness skills as we get more experience. That has to do obviously with everything from traffic to track condition. And we should get better and better at being sensitive to what the car is telling us. I've described how we can improve our reaction time with the kinds of exercises and skills that I've just outlined here. They can help us via visualization, practicing on the road, doing deliberate practice sessions on track, having a trigger phrase, and all of that is essential against this mental baseline. If we don't have the mental baseline, then we're not going to be driving as well as we could, nor are we going to be as safe as possible on track. Again, I hope all of this gives you some ideas and ways that you can give yourself an out when you get to the track and keep you safe on track. I look forward to seeing you at the track very soon. Have a great day.